Welcome to a Wednesday edition of the First Things First podcast. I'm your host, Jenna Wolfe. Catch us Monday through Friday, 6:30 a.m. Eastern on FS1. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts. Tell us what you think and leave us a review. Time now to bring in Nick and the Hall of Famer Cris Carter. We're going to start, though, with the Tennessee Titans backup quarterback situation. The first time that'll most likely ever happen, as the first story shy of when we actually start living in Tennessee. After Marcus Mariota's hamstring injury on Sunday, the Titans, who already have Matt Castle on the roster, signed quarterback Brandon Weeden. Okay, so the Titans also reportedly considered Matt Barkley, Matt McGloin, T.J. Yates, none of whom are Colin Kaepernick. So we kick things off this morning by Nick Wright. I ask you, what is your reaction to Colin Kaepernick not even getting a workout, much less, obviously, signed to a backup situation?
I'm glad you asked about the workout part of it, because Cris brought this up yesterday, and it was an aspect I hadn't really even thought about much, because I don't think, much like certain actors don't really audition for roles, they get offered roles and they pick the ones they want. I think Colin Kaepernick's moved past the part of his career where he has to work out for teams. But Cris brought up the point, like, can we at least get him to a workout?
Yes.
Every team brings in multiple guys at different positions of need every single Monday or Tuesday. Can Colin at least get in for a workout?
And let me just stop you for a second. Tell people, what is the workout for? Is it to see how fit you are? Is it to see if you fit into a system? Or is it to see if mentally that team is a good fit for you?
Well, usually, and Cris, tell me if I'm wrong, usually a team says, okay, we have a wide receiver banged up. This guy, we think we're not getting enough performance out of our secondary. We have a list. Let's bring in these 5 guys, and maybe we sign none of them. At most, we sign one of them. We want to see with our eyes if any of these guys are an improvement on the field over what we currently have.
Right. And if you were going to make a decision on them after working them out and seeing some of the other things too, checking all the boxes, then you could immediately sign them. Right. But a workout is critical.
And so for the Titans, obviously, the situation is they don't know if Marcus Mariota is going to be active this week. They have elevated Matt Castle, but if Mariota is not active, they need a backup quarterback because Matt Castle has a history of injuries and a much more elongated history of just horrific play. So they need to have someone else that can play the position. And when I see these names, Brandon Weeden, Matt McGloin, my friend, so I apologize, T.J. Yates, and I'm buddies with T.J., but he's not good. He knows he's not good. He knows he's T.J. Yates.
Okay.
He won't take it the wrong way. And Matt Barkley. And I've also been told certain teams won't bring Cap in because he doesn't fit the system they run, but the Titans run his system. I just throw my pen up in the air and I say, okay, like we've now moved the goalposts so far to where it's like, well, I mean, is Cap even good enough to try out? Like, do we know Colin Kaepernick actually ever played football? Maybe that's a myth. Maybe Colin Kaepernick, as it turns out, was a baseball player this whole time. It's just nonsense. And I look at the Titans, and I say they got 2 pretty good running backs. They've spent a good amount of money on that defense. They're in a pretty weak division, even though everyone this week is very excited about the Houston Texans. And the Tennessee Titans are flatly putting some type of non-football agenda ahead of putting the best possible team on the field. And if I were a Titans fan, and thank goodness I am not, that would offend me to my core.
Another thing that, Nick, that you mentioned, for those who don't think Cap would fit in, like this is one of the worst teams where the quarterback would be injured. Now, I wish he had more of a long-term injury. Then I think we could make a stronger case, because he's day-to-day with a hamstring, with a quarterback who's a dual threat.
And I know what you mean. I just wanted so people don't kill you for it. You don't wish he had a long-term injury. If he had a longer-term injury, this would more apply. You're not wishing Mariota to be injured.
No,
I don't want people to kill you.
Of course
Go
not.
ahead.
He's got a hamstring injury. It's day-to-day. Could be week-to-week. It's a little tricky with quarterbacks because that's not an injury that most quarterbacks have. It's more of an explosive thing, right, and skilled guys get it more so than quarterbacks. I see what Tennessee is doing, though. I mean, they're removing it from the equation because I think they should have brought Cap in with all these other guys. because it makes it easier. It's harder if you bring in Cap by himself. And then if you don't sign him, then you can still be criticized. But if you bring him in with 4 or 5 other guys, you're like, wow, we worked them out. No one else is there. They can make the case that, these other guys worked out more. At least they have a legitimate excuse.
And I interrupted you. Why are the Titans such a bad team to have their quarterback go down?
Because they can't make the excuse that the system, because they're one of the top 3 or 4 teams as far as read option. They have a quarterback that is a very good athlete. He's also trying to develop into a pocket passer, but where he is right now, he's where Cap was.
Yeah.
Actually, Cap was the original version of this that teams are now trying to copycat and see how they can build on what Cap did.
I remember, and then I'll let you go, Jenna. I just want to remind people, when Marcus Mariota was going through the draft process, it was before Cap. Forget the kneeling, because I think everyone understands he has deteriorated somewhat as a player from his peak. He is not as good as he was under Jim Harbaugh. I'm not making that argument. I'm not making the argument Cap's still a top 10 quarterback. But when Mariota was coming into the league, some of the draftnik commentary was his draft status is being boosted because people have seen this style succeed with Colin Kaepernick. That was the comparison people were making. We have seen this style go to a Super Bowl because in years past, people were afraid of that type of quarterback, thinking that won't work on this level. If Cap didn't exist, I don't know if Mariota's a top 3 pick, even if his skill set's the exact same.
No, I was just going to say, echoing what you said, not only does he fit the system, Colin Kaepernick is the system. If there was a team that he could come in, this would be the team and this would be the situation. I agree with your point, but then the logical next question becomes, if he is not brought in for a situation like this, what has to happen for him to be an option? What has to happen for him to be brought in? Because at the beginning of the season, we said, well, it has to happen here. Well, if it doesn't happen here, well, it's going to definitely happen here. And if it doesn't happen there, well, it has to be the system. And if it's not the system, it's got to be someone who, with the mobile quarterback or this. We went through everything already. So I'm curious now, is there nothing left at this point? Is he not going to get signed, or is there any situation by which you can see a team bring him in?
I still hold out hope that he gets signed. But there are situations that aren't the best fit for him. I understand that. That argument that we run a system that we feel like Cap is not the best, I understand that. Tennessee is not a team that can say that.
That's his system.
Tennessee, right. And you were talking before the meeting, Tennessee might particularly forget the football fit. The city fit and the way people have been reacting to some of their players might be but why some of the off-the-field stuff is particularly bad for him there.
Yeah, Megan Lindsay sang the national anthem, took a knee, received multiple death threats. Delaney Walker, tight end, great guy, unbelievable. He took a knee for the national anthem. He's gotten death threats. Now, there's people that have booed the players in other cities. There's people that have even burned jerseys. But to make a death threat? Now, this is what's going on. So you have to think, wow, was that put in consideration when they decided not to buy him a plane ticket or put him in a hotel and maybe buy him a couple meals, because that's all it cost?
And I want to bring up something that people, and it amazes me, the logical pretzels people twist themselves into on this one. Forget the fact that I had people in my mentions yesterday saying, this is a direct quote, but Brandon Weeden throws such a pretty pass. Like,
yeah, to the other team.
Yeah, I mean, what are you talking about? I had people in my mentions yesterday defending Matt Castle as if over the last 4 years, he hasn't been one of the worst, if not the worst quarterback, other than Blake Bortles, to get significant starts. So, but set that part aside.
If Matt Castle doesn't get drafted by New England, if he doesn't get that little bit of, if he doesn't get the Bill Belichick stamp, he is not in pro football.
And that
he did not even start in college.
Cece, and I know you don't go out to the clubs much anymore, but sometimes you get that stamp on your wrist, and then if you don't wash your hands really well, it just slowly fades over the next few days. That Bill Belichick stamp faded off years and years ago. But I just want to make one point on this. Set aside how good these or bad these other players are. People somehow still believe that, well, I mean, you were able to sign Brandon Whedon for a league minimum salary. Cap's not accepting that. Who in your life has no job opportunities and is saying, you know what, has had no job opportunities for 9 months,
right,
and their answer to $700,000 a year is, no, I'm holding out for $5 million.
But you guys
like
said
that doesn't exist.
If there are teams receiving death threats,
No,
bringing
the
players, but those are essentially the teams. Why would an owner, and I understand what's happening with Cap, and I sympathize with him not playing football, that I do. But why would an owner want to take that chance and make it even? I know you don't like the word of distraction, whatever word you want to use. Why would you want to bring that?
Because, Jenna, because we've seen the NFL do it for guys that actually did wrong.
But no one that got death threats.
Jenna, hold on a second. You don't think teams got angry letters about Greg Hardy? You don't think teams got angry letters about Leonard Little? You don't think teams
and they don't want to do it again?
No, but
they don't want to go through it again.
Okay.
I'm not saying it's a similar situation. You're right,
first
Nick.
of all, Cap said that he would be standing during the national anthem. So he would be standing. They have players that are kneeling that are currently on the roster being paid.
But the proverbial damage, if you will, or whatever you want to call it, fallout, has already been done. What comes with it has already been done. I understand that.
Let's just keep making excuses.
The national media. I understand.
Let me tell you what you're promising your season ticket holders. I'm going to put a professional freaking football team out there for you to see. All right? And if you are bringing in Brandon Whedon, if you are bringing in Matt Barkley, come on, you are straight tripping if you think Colin Kaepernick is not better. These guys have never been good in the NFL.
The owners don't want to take a chance on bringing this kind of distraction onto their team.
I am not
agreeing with that.
I know you're not.
Exactly,
and I'm not. I'm raising my voice at the frustration of the situation, not with you. If the league had made it clear we are not tolerating, quote, distractions for any reason, I would have less of an issue with this. But when teams clearly are, I do not believe they are purely weighing distraction. I believe you have owners who disagree with his cause, and more so than they disagree with domestic violence, more so than they disagree with drunk driving, and saying, you know what, because when they sign those players, the answer's always been, yeah, it'll be noisy for a few weeks, but if we win, no one will care. And the answer with Cap is, I don't care if we'd win with him. I don't want him on my team. And you did say one thing I really disagree with, though, which is we thought, well, eventually he'd get signed. The moment people started making the moment people said, wait for the draft, wait for free agency. Once those two things passed, other people might have been waiting for other things. I didn't need to. It was to me, the proof was out there. This guy will never play professional football. I know, Nick, I was.
Because a lot of people thought, well, someone will go down. They will need a backup. They'll need some situation. There are a lot of people that still think there's got to be some situation.
I mean, I hope I'm wrong. I say this with respect. I think those people it's wishful thinking. Because if the Titans would rather run out Matt Castle and Brandon Whedon when Marcus Mariota's their guy, then there's not a better fit. There's not a team that's...
Agreed. But we don't have to all be confused about what's happening here, I guess is what I'm saying. We know exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
Coach Mangini still with us on First Things First. The Patriots are no longer the favorites to win it all. Well, at least that, according to the sports betting world. The Steelers have taken that top spot. That's right. New England now 5-1, while the Steelers are 9-2. That's betting. That's betting odds, right?
Yeah, you got it, Jenna.
If you're going to gamble, that's what happens. Coach, you buying that the Steelers are better than the Patriots? I'm learning. Betting's not my thing. You know.
Yeah, I'm learning about betting too.
You are every time a commercial break. Now you hit on the 16. Is that what we're doing?
I had a whole tutorial.
I know you did.
I'm ready. I'll be in
next
Atlantic
week.
City in
Poker.
about 15 minutes.
Right. Things have shuffled around right now. Right now, Vegas seems to think that the Steelers are in a much better position than the Patriots. How do you feel about that?
I like the Steelers. I think that one thing that doesn't get talked about is the improvements that they made on defense. And for a long time, the Steelers did one thing, and they did one thing very well. But they've evolved and changed and added some things and some variety to that defense, which has taken some time. But you see the value of it as they've kind of moved deeper into the system. So I like that part about it. I think they're very explosive offensively. They haven't hit their stride.
They haven't done it yet. They have the potential to, but we haven't seen a game where they've really exploded on offense.
Yeah, unfortunately, I've coached in games where they've exploded on offense with this personnel, and it's painful when it happens. To you. Oh my God. And the fact they were committed to the running game last week, and you saw that, and they're trying to get that aspect going. They've got explosive players across the field. Big Ben can make things happen. They've underachieved to some degree against teams they should have beaten and teams they should have performed a lot better against. That's something that I think will improve as well. I like it. I don't know if I like them better than Kansas City or some of the other teams that are behind them.
But you like them better than the Patriots.
Do I like them better than the Patriots? I have a hard time betting.
So let me ask you this way.
Let
me ask you this way. Do you like them better than the Patriots?
I don't. I'd have a hard time betting against the Patriots.
Okay.
Well, this is the thing, too, and Coach knows this, that New England has, especially almost anywhere, they've destroyed Pittsburgh. Like, this Pittsburgh team has not matched up well with Tom Brady. They haven't had a lot of success, but their defensive changes. They get more pressure on the quarterback. They're committed to the running game. And, see, Vegas, what they see is they see New England's defense. And they know if they can't stop the run, all right, they're going to have a hard time defeating Pittsburgh. Also, if they keep the pass coverage going with the wide receivers on Pittsburgh, it's a better matchup for Pittsburgh going against the New England team that we've seen in September. Now, let's see what the odds are once we get to November. And even if we were in the AFC Championship game, if they were playing it this weekend in Pittsburgh, regardless of what the records were, both of them made it there, I would not bet against New England going against Pittsburgh because they've had too much success against Pittsburgh.
Here is what I think Vegas is looking at, which is the same thing I'm looking at right now, which is the Patriots have made 7 Super Bowls in this era. Every single one of them, they have had a bye. And at 2-2, with a road game against Tampa this week, a few weeks, they're at home against Atlanta. Then at Denver, at Oakland. By the way, the Oakland game is when Carr should be back. 2 games against Buffalo. And a game at Pittsburgh. I think Vegas is looking at and saying, hard to see how this team doesn't have 5 or 6 losses come the end of the year. 5 or 6 losses means you're not getting the bye, even if you win your division. Even if you stay above Buffalo and you have that first playoff game at home, you're not getting a bye. And I think Vegas is looking at that and saying, can New England win 3 consecutive playoff games, definitely one of which, most likely 2 of which, on the road in January? It's something we've, as great as Brady and Belichick have been, we've never seen them do because they've rarely had to do it. They usually have a bye, even years they don't make the Super Bowl. And at 2-2, with Kansas City and Denver, maybe the 2 best teams in the league, both with a better record than you, and you have to go to Denver. You already lost to Kansas City.
Right.
And Pittsburgh has a better record than you. You have to go to Pittsburgh. Buffalo's got a better record than you. You have 2 games against them. I think Vegas is looking at it and saying, how do they get that bye? And that bye is so critical for them.
I lost you in a lot of that because the whole idea of
welcome to my life.
Well, just the idea of projecting out to who's going to get the bye at the end of the season when we're this early in the season it's just not. It's not realistic.
I don't stop it. You always do this.
Isn't Vegas just about who's betting on who? And we've got to hedge it to make sure that we have enough money so at the end of the day we make more than the better.
Correct. That is absolutely.
And if you lower New England's odds, you get people to jump in and get action because remember, New England was a lock to be in the Super Bowl before the season. Vegas we hadn't had a favorite that large in 10 years, Coach. So now Vegas thought they were right. Now Vegas has flipped the script to get more people involved in the game. You're right. You're on to them.
Yeah, it's not a function of, well, they're going to get the bye, they're not going to get the bye. It's we need more cash on this team.
Hold on. Okay, that's
isn't it?
Fine. So
I'm no expert on Vegas, but I think that's how it works.
Okay, well, it is how it works. However, when you give, I mean, if we're going to talk about this for a moment, we can. When you lower New England's odds or give it a better return, the way you lose money is if a lot of people bet them at 5-1 and then they go win the Super Bowl. They're not in the business of losing money. They would not be making New England less likely to win the Super Bowl if they deep down thought this team's going to win the Super Bowl. Take Vegas out of it. You do this thing always where you say, listen, we can't project forward. And I understand that Bill Belichick can't project forward. But that does not mean when we are looking at the Patriots, we can't do what we do with every team, which is look at how, now that we know kind of how good and bad teams are, before the year looking at strength of schedule is tough because you don't know how good or bad teams are. I am confident in saying Kansas City's a good team. I'm confident in saying Denver's a good team. I'm confident in saying Pittsburgh and Buffalo are good teams. The Patriots have to go on the road to those last three. That matters. Just like the fact that they still have 2 games left against the Jets and Dolphins, that matters. We do this with every team where we look at who they have coming up and what that means for their likelihood of getting to 10, 11, 12 wins.
But what I'm confident in is New England's ability to evaluate what they do well, what they do poorly, to self-correct, to make adjustments. A lot of those other teams you talked about, I'm not confident in their ability to do that.
He's not confident in Kansas City.
And the other thing,
and there's no way he can be confident in Pittsburgh.
And anybody who's sitting around in a locker room looking at their schedule saying, we're going to win that one, we're not going to win that one, we're going to get the bye, that's a problem. That's what kills a bunch of teams. It hurt me in New York when we were, 8-2, and guys started talking about the Super Bowl. It was the last thing we should have ever been talking about because it went south from there.
New York Giants, the football Giants, 0-4 after that nail-biting loss to Tampa Bay on Sunday. Let us not forget, some at this table, tables around the country, had the Giants getting to the Super Bowl, but despite the early season woes, quarterback Eli Manning has not lost hope of the season.
We still feel like we're a good team, that we can win a lot of games. The way the league has gotten, there's not as many just dominant teams. Still feel it's open, and we can get on a hot streak. You got to get that first one. There's not many mistakes being made. Guys are doing the right thing. Well, we just got to do it better.
Nick, are the 0-4 Giants better than their record, so to speak?
They're definitely better than their record. You look at the other teams that are 0-4. They're better than San Francisco.
Better than the record,
That doesn't mean they're good enough to make the playoffs. Doesn't mean they're good enough to.
It doesn't matter. They're not playing San Francisco.
Can I answer the question I was asked?
Yeah,
my good
better
friend.
Than San Francisco. Are they a good team?
The question wasn't are they a good team. It was are they better than their record? And yes, they're better than 0-4, but that doesn't make them a good team. The Browns are right 0-4. The Niners are the right 0-4. The Giants have the talent, and they've shown it the last 2 games, to be better than 0-4. Unfortunately for them, it might not matter. If it takes, let's say this is one of the fortunate years, and there's a 9-win wild card. Still got to go 9-3 the rest of the way in a very difficult division. Most years it takes 10 wins to win the wild card.
Yes.
Then you got to go 10-2 the rest of the way, which is why I know everyone is focusing on the Tampa Bay game because they had a lead in the final minute and they blew it. But man, oh man, the week before against Philly, when a 61-yard field goal beats you, the longest, I believe, the longest game-winning field goal at the buzzer in NFL history. If they just win that game, everything else is the same. They're 1 game back in the division. They're 1-3. Cowboys, Washington, Eagles 2-2, and they feel okay. But it didn't go that way, and now the question is the hole too big for them to get out of?
Wait, can I just say one thing before we move on? We always talk about how the very end, how the game ends, and if it just didn't end that way. That's just circumstances. That's just when the clock stops and 60 minutes is up. There were many opportunities. I mean, not a ton for them, but there could have been many opportunities for them to get back into the game, much like the Tampa Bay game. And first of all, Tampa Bay left 7 points out there with missed field goals and whatnot that it should have been a different score. So that's just where the game ended. Yes, they're probably a little bit better than 0-4, but they're still 0-4.
Nick, my biggest issue is I would say a team like Detroit, which you don't give any respect to.
None.
They get behind. They win some games. We don't give them credit. The Giants get behind. They lose some games, but we give them credit, and even though they lost the game, all right? Winning is very important. Jenna, the difference between the good teams and the bad teams, the good teams win the close games. Now, I'm going to tell you what the Giants have. The Giants have some good players, but they're not a good team. Because good teams find a way compared to making excuses of ways of how they lost the game. Now, they're not collectively playing well as a team. You can talk about the offensive line the first 2 weeks. The last 2 weeks, the offensive line has been better. You can talk about the running game for a couple games. It's been there. The other games, it's been absent. You can talk about Eli, lack of good decision-making. That's been there. Odell Beckham, you could talk about him in the receiving core, him not being there the first 2 games, Brandon Marshall not being there for 4 games. Right. But they're still not a good football team. People thought there was going to be an automatic carryover from the great defense they had. The offensive line would be better. And now Eli adding Brandon Marshall in a 3-receiver set, they would be better offensively.
And Odell being Odell.
Yeah, those things have not happened. So their defense has let them down. Brad Wing, the punter, has let them down 2 weeks in a row where they needed an NFL punt, an average punt, not a great punt. And he's a good punter. He shanks 2 punts late in the game, which leaves the team on the short field, which led to 2 comeback losses.
Right, their coaches let them down, leaving points on the field in back-to-back weeks, as you discussed yesterday. We are going to focus on Odell and Eli and the offensive line, even though the offensive line hasn't allowed a sack the last 2 games. But the part of the season that to me has been the most surprising is what CC mentioned, the defense. I understand you can't simply say this was one of the 3 best defenses in football last year. It's going to be one of the 3 best defenses in football this year. But for them to be as good as they were last year at every level, D-line, linebacker, secondary, and then be as bad as they've been this year, 25th scoring defense, 28th against the run, like they have been a bad defense. Sometimes you go from a really good defense to an okay defense. To go from really good to pretty bad with the same players, that one, I will admit, I did not see coming at all.
Back to the NBA, the Cavaliers have had a lot of turnover in their roster this season, but they've had exactly 0 changes to their expectations in meeting up with the Warriors in the finals for the 4th straight season. Here is newly acquired forward Jay Crowder with more.
I can tell by schemes and stuff that we've been putting in is it's all in place for that matchup. You know what those guys bring, because they're very dynamic in how they play on the offensive end. And I think with us having a lot of different schemes in our back pocket is going to help come late.
CC, I'll start with you this time. Is it a lock that we see the Warriors and the Cavaliers back in the finals for the 4th straight year?
It's hard to be a lock in sports, but with LeBron James, he's the most predictable thing to happen in any sport. Is he going to make it to the finals? The Celtics have 9 new players. So it's hard to, in training camp, it's a special time. Not only because they've assembled some new pieces in Cleveland, but their philosophy is to beat Golden State. So Crowder, he's not used to that because he hadn't gotten past LeBron. So I know that the last couple years in training camp, the Cavs have done things to prepare them for the Warriors and or the changes that the Warriors have made, because there won't be any other time during the season that Ty Lue can stop the team, get them focused, and be like, listen, all right, this is the team in the West. And I love the fact that they have publicly stated what their target is. Okay, privately they're doing it, but publicly, this is our target. Golden State. We're going to spend some time in training camp because we're not going to have that time during the season. So it's what they should be doing. And it's nice to see, because if it doesn't work, 15 or 30 games, they can make adjustments getting ready for the finals. Last year, they gave up the #1 seed. I mean, they just gave it away. Sat people, they had the #1 seed easily. They gave it to Boston. And this year, they can experiment to try to get the formula right before they get to the playoff. I think it's a good thing.
I love that you're attacking this with the question being, will the Cavs Warriors meet for a 4th straight year? I love that you're attacking this from what Cleveland has to do. Here's what Cleveland has to do to get there. Is LeBron James on the roster? Okay, they're in the finals. So let's talk about the other side of it. The Golden State Warriors. Golden State Warriors, which I know everyone's already written them in. They're going to win 5, 6 championships. They're going to go on this long run of success. And I would
why aren't the Cavs preparing for OKC? Okay, wait. Why aren't the Cavs preparing for Houston? Why? San Antonio.
Would you like me to answer that?
Well, yeah.
Because I think they know if OKC, Houston, or San Antonio comes into the finals, the Cavs are massive favorites. And they also know that the Warriors, They've played them 3 years. They've lost 2 of them. That's a team they need to make some adjustments against. The Warriors this year should be, theoretically, the best Warriors team. But I want to talk about teams, the Warriors' likelihood of making the NBA Finals. Because I get it. Jeff Van Gundy, one of my favorites. He's not talking about them making the finals. He's talking about, listen, just write off the next 3 years of the NBA. The Warriors are just going to be champions, champions, champions. I would like to remind people, we have done this before. It almost never goes that way. In modern NBA history, and I'm going back 50 years, basically since Russell Celtics, here's who has made 4 straight NBA Finals. Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, LeBron James. Kobe never did it. Shaq never did it. Michael never did it, okay? It's really hard to go through 4 straight seasons that long. And you might say, so Nick, you're saying the Warriors might not make the finals this year? I'm saying that we have seen great teams. We've seen the Lakers with Wilt and Elgin make 3 straight, then miss a year, then go back-to-back the next 2 years. We've seen the Lakers in the latter era, Magic Johnson era, with Magic and Worthy, make 3 straight, miss a year, and then go back the next year. The Bad Boy Pistons, which people thought, they made the finals and lost, won back-to-back finals. Okay, they're going back again. In year 4, they didn't. Kobe, twice. 3-peat champs. Oh, they're obviously going back to the finals. Shaq and Kobe still there. They get knocked out in the Western Conference semifinals. Kobe and Powell. Oh, they're back-to-back champs. They've been there 3 straight. They're obviously going back. They got swept in the Western Conference semifinals. The idea that the Warriors are just an absolute lock, when OKC, as you pointed out, is much better. When Houston, if it gels, should be much better. When the Spurs, who we saw the Spurs for 2.5 quarters before Zaza killed Kawhi, give the Warriors trouble in the conference finals. When the Spurs should be at least as good as they were last year once Kawhi gets back. Like, the idea that the Warriors are a lock for the NBA Finals is something I reject.
The idea that at first I would agree with you, and I'd say, well, the idea that the Cavs are a lock in the East is also something else, until I went back and started to fall a little bit in love with LeBron, similar to the way you have, and realized, where were you in 2010? This guy has been in the finals since 2010. 2009, I didn't have any children. You were in high school. Like, I don't know where you were in 2010.
Doing this.
It was seemingly. Like, it is a long time for a guy to do anything. So I would agree with you that they're not a lock, but I kind of agree now that you think that maybe the Cavs are a lock. So guess what? I think we are going to see those
This is the thing. I think Nick has somewhere in the equation that some type of injury would pop up, that they might not be able to stay healthy because they haven't had any injuries. I think that's in his equation more so than they're not the best team, right? Because they are the best team in basketball. Cleveland is right to prepare for them, especially in training camp, because it's a rarefied atmosphere. And yes, what are the numbers in Vegas?
It's not expensive.
They're the wild. They're the
what does Vegas
enormous
say?
favorites.
What does Vegas say?
Enormous favorites.
Okay.
Cece.
Who am I listening to?
Shaq and Kobe were the best team. And they missed it going into year 4.
I understand all that. But as we stand today, they're healthy. The Warriors, and if they're healthy, they'll be in the
You're right
final.
about the injuries thing, man. You're right about that. They've had incredible injury luck on both sides, for them and against them.
So when LeBron stays healthy, it's just because he's an amazing athlete. But when the other players stay healthy...
No. When LeBron stays healthy, we can attribute that, sure, to one player.
Yeah.
But his team as a whole...
Draymond's been healthy.
What?
Clay's been
healthy.
healthy.
That's my point.
Steph
the entire team staying healthy
Good athletes
is lucky.
stay healthy.
LeBron's never been injured ever. Steph had injuries early in his career.
He broke his
Durant
wrist
had
in junior
injuries.
years. He broke his wrist playing football.
We're now joined by Fox's lead college football analyst, Joel Klatt. Hi, Joel. Thanks for being with us this morning.
Yeah, you bet. Good to be with you guys.
So let's start here. I know it's only October. There seems to be this growing feeling that Alabama and Clemson are pulling away from the rest of the field. They're locks for the playoff already. Do you buy that?
I don't. I think that that's a national sentiment that has been created because of how good those teams have been over the last couple of years. But what people fail to realize is the depth that this year is providing, and it's really providing that across all conferences. Just think about some of the wins that we've seen, some of the players that we've seen, some of the performances that we've seen so far during the course of the year. We've seen Oklahoma go into a hostile environment and win at the shoe and beating Ohio State with Baker Mayfield. We've got some great defenses combined with quarterbacks that are going to be able to challenge for this thing this year. I think a team like Georgia has shown itself that they can be a great defense. Who knows what they can do in the SEC? Auburn's got a great defense in the SEC West, so I don't know if it's a cakewalk for Bama in that respect. We've got other teams like in the Big 12, TCU. They're going to challenge against Oklahoma. Washington's a good defense again. I think there's more balance and parity than people realize in college football, but I understand how that sentiment has started with the fact that the Tigers and the Tide have been so dominant over the last couple of years.
Joel, if it is Clemson, Alabama in the title game, people love dynasties in pro sports. People are excited for Cavs Warriors Part 3. Is a Clemson, Alabama Part 3 good for college football?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't think it is. College football is not based on stars, and the NBA is a great example. You brought up Cavs Warriors. We want to see Steph play against LeBron, right? We want to see Kevin Durant, have to go out there and answer his critics and with all of those things in his shoe, whatever all the hate that he has in his shoe. That's what we want to see. We want to see those stars. That's not the case in college football. It's more organic in its tribalism. It's more regionalized than people realize, I think. And so I think it's important that we get some challengers from outside of the region of the Southeast, quite frankly. And in particular, when you're talking about recruiting, we in college football need the kids around the country who are 17 and 18 years old to think that they can go anywhere and win a national title, and not just that they've got to go down into the Southeast Conference or even into the ACC in that southern part of the ACC in order to win a national championship. So I don't think it's good for college football if we see Bama and Clemson again.
Joe, I need you to set me straight. A lot of reports coming out of Southern California that Sam Darnold is considering leaving after this year. Now,
sure.
The reports before the season was he loved college, loved being a college student, loved being a star at USC. Now, Joe, I haven't seen anything that would lead me to believe in this short season that he should leave college. He hasn't even mastered college football. I think he needs more experience, and I'm not comfortable with early in the season with not having success. What have you seen that would lead him to want to leave if this report is true?
He has played, CC, much better on the film, on the field, than he has on the stat sheet. And so I understand there's going to be a lot of people that are saying, hey, Sam Darnold hasn't played well. The simple fact is that they won a couple of games because he was on the field, and that might have been the sole reason that they won the game. One of them was the Texas game. So when you see reports like this, I don't know where that's coming from. He may stay, he may go. I don't think that he's going to have a wrong decision. The NFL personnel that I've talked to still think that Sam Darnold is not only the best quarterback, but probably likely a top pick in the draft. He has forced the ball down the field a few times, and that was born out of the fact that he's got really inexperienced wide receivers. They've been banged up. Their offensive line has been decimated by injuries. They lost both tackles. They had a true freshman out there last week against Washington State. And I think Sam Darnold's looking at it as like, do I want to sit here in college and, have an injury to a left tackle affect my draft stock? I'm not sure. Now, let me just be devil's advocate for what you're saying, is that he may not be ready. Because when you look at the NFL right now, the guys that are true franchise quarterbacks that have won a Super Bowl, that can go out there and they can pull down that ring of, I think it's 7 or 8 guys that have won a Super Bowl that are currently quarterbacks in the NFL. If you go back and look at their college numbers, they started on average about 30 games and they attempted 1,100 passes. So experience and reps pays dividends if you want to go be a franchise quarterback. If you're looking at it from that point of view, CC, maybe Darnold should come back.
Joel, I was not surprised this weekend I was surprised that LSU lost to Troy, but I wasn't surprised that after they lost to Troy, people were already talking about should they fire Ed Orgeron. But I was shocked when I found out he has a $12 million buyout in his contract. I think I know how contracts work. Like, if Joel Klatt's contract is up, he goes up to the bosses. He's like, this network wants to give me all this money. This network wants to give me all this money. You got to give me more. Nobody was trying to give Ed Orgeron anything close to what LSU was. Nobody wanted to make him a head coach. He's from there. It's his dream job. How does Ed Orgeron get a $12 million buyout? How does that work in college football?
I mean, I don't know, but who's his agent? Because we all need that guy's number. My goodness. That's why, you know, when you talk about this situation with LSU and Ed Orgeron, the heat right now is not necessarily on Orgeron as much as it is on the athletic director, Joe Alleva. And Joe Alleva is in hot water because there's been a lot of things there that the fan base in particular and some of the larger boosters have not liked. They didn't like how messy it got with Les Miles. And let's be honest, when you've got a guy that wins 75% of his games, 80% of his league games, has won the SEC, has beaten Nick Saban, has won a national championship, played for another national championship, and kind of got robbed by the formula because he had to rematch against Alabama in what I thought was kind of an unfair rematch. And they fired him and hired a defensive line coach. I mean, listen, I'm not brilliant, but you could probably see where this was going. That roster is not where it should be. They're starting a lot of true freshmen. It's going to take some time, but I will tell you this. They're in a precarious situation right now. Nick, think about what the budget is like for the state of Louisiana. There was a story last year at the beginning of the year that LSU might have to forfeit a game because they weren't going to be able to compete based on the fact that the state legislature couldn't pass a budget. So I don't think that there's a big appetite here for, you know, $12 million for a guy like Ed Orgeron. And there are reports that it might not be the full 12, but it could be 9. But still, they're in a very precarious situation. And that's why I think the guy that is on the hottest seat in Baton Rouge is actually the athletic director, Joe Alleva.
Joel, I want to get back to the Heisman chatter for just a second. Since last we talked, Penn State's running back Saquon Barkley has exploded onto the scene. There's a lot of talk of him as being a Heisman frontrunner. Is he your leading Heisman favorite? And if so, what makes this kid so special?
I think I'm the contrarian here because he's actually not my favorite. And I know he's the favorite in Vegas. But there's a simple fact for me is that Saquon Barkley has not been the best player in college football or the most impactful. He's been the most electric, and I think he's garnered a lot of headlines because of that. But think about some of the things that have gone on this year. Last week against Indiana, Saquon Barkley averaged under 3 yards per carry as a running back. I understand he had the 98-yard kickoff return, and that was great. But you can't be a Heisman-winning running back and average under 3 yards per carry against Indiana, especially when I saw a true freshman in week 1 shred Indiana, and his name is J.K. Dobbins playing for Ohio State, especially when I see a player like Baker Mayfield, who lost one of the best coaches in his school's history. That school's history happens to be Oklahoma, which is a pretty storied history. He loses Bob Stoops. He loses a 1,500-yard wide receiver in Dede Westbrook. He loses 2 1,000-yard rushers in Samaje Perine and Joe Mixon, and yet he is still leading the nation in almost every passing statistical category that is meaningful, including passer rating after setting the NCAA record a year ago. Baker Mayfield is and should be the leader for your Heisman Trophy so far in the season. Now, it is early, but there's a lot of love being thrown to Saquon Barkley, and I'm going to say pump the brakes on that a little bit because I don't think he's even been the best running back in the nation. He's not the leading rusher in the nation. He's not the leading rusher in the Big Ten Conference, much less leading the Heisman conversation at this point.
Joe, let's stay in the Big Ten. You're going to be calling the Ohio State game this week against Maryland, homecoming. What have you seen on film with the Buckeyes, and what changes have they made since the loss to Oklahoma?
Yeah, so they had to change offensively, CC, you know it. And in particular, a guy like you were probably screaming at the TV for what? Throw the ball down the field, weren't you?
I thought Woody Hayes was back alive, man. I thought they were running the 70s offense that I watched as a baby.
So think about it from this perspective. They've gone about correcting that issue. Now, I know that the opponents have not been great, Army, UNLV, and Rutgers, but against Rutgers, J.T. Barrett connected on 3 different passes where the football traveled 20 or more yards down the field. And he had a 4th pass of that nature that was actually called back because of offensive pass interference. But up to that point, he had only completed 2 of those passes all year. They're going about correcting this issue. In the last 2 games, he's averaged 12 yards or more per attempt. That's the first time that's happened in his entire career. So they're going about correcting that issue. He's getting better. He's throwing with better timing. He was more accurate down the field. And this will be a better test because Maryland's a better team, in particular a better defense than what Rutgers puts out there. And this is a team that's going to have to correct these issues because that Penn State game is looming here in the month of October.
Thank you for listening to the First Things First podcast. Remember, leave us a review and tell us what you think. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts and catch us on FS1 Monday through Friday, 6:30 a.m. Eastern. For Cris Carter and Nick Wright, I'm Jenna Wolfe. So long, everybody.